if you look at the Pause Act that was just passed by the government, and listen, we need our government, but we can't rely on our government to help with these social issues. And I mean, we can see by the lackluster performance of the VA in my entire lifetime, right? And it's not to say that the people there aren't trying hard and aren't working hard and aren't valuable, because they are. What's broken is the process. And what's broken is the fact that I have to go and prove to the VA every 5 years that my leg hasn't grown back. Like, that's just ridiculous.
Welcome to the What I Meant to Say podcast. I'm your host, Wendy Jones, founder of Be Better Media and a mom of 4, passionate about human connection. Throughout my journey, I have experienced many What I Meant to Say moments, but since life doesn't give us do-overs, I've created a space to reflect and tell our stories again with a little more grace for ourselves and the hope that we can help others and be better for having listened. Welcome to the What I Meant to Say podcast. I'm your host, Wendy Jones, and I'm here today with GJ Ganem, a Marine Corps vet and founder of Sierra Delta Service Dog nonprofit organization that helps veterans connect with dogs to uplift their lives and
Right.
just really give them a new chance. So thank you so much for being with me today. This
Well,
is amazing.
yeah, thanks for having me. And it's we're pivoting a little bit right now. We're including more of the other types of dogs. Which is what we call our dog program, the Life Buddy program. And
Yeah.
then we're really looking for ways to help these veterans connect with their community and other people through service. So we're really pivoting to make it about Sierra Delta's about service, dogs, and veterans, right? So finding ways in our Life Force program for them to engage with the community through giving again, to serving others, right? So the wellness that we can gain from serving others and the love of dogs is what Sierra Delta's about.
It's so beautiful. And I mean, we've all felt that. Anyone that's ever had a dog, which is most of us, has felt
Yeah.
that firsthand, how it really can be a life-changing relationship. And I know you've seen that.
Mhm.
But I'd love to get into, right off the bat, just that difference that you're seeing, between a service dog and then the other types of dogs that you were just explaining, and how there is that need out there for not just a trained service dog, but can you
Right.
explain to people a little bit more about that?
Well, the service dog industry really began after World War II is when it really became um, more defined as an industry to react to a lot of blindness and a lot of other disabilities, right? And it continued down that route. It was more of the guide dog um, mantra, which and programs which worked. But the relationship with your dog, you're right. Humans and dogs have been working together for 35,000 years. So to answer your question quickly, there's really no difference between an ADA, like medical assistance service dog, and a trained canine good citizen or all the other labels you can come up with the training around the dog. And what the wellness and the connection that a person can have. There's no more deeper connection between a service dog and a human and a pet and a human. What we're trying to do is really boil this down in the fact that, especially for something like PTSD, for PTSD, for 99.5% of the cases, you do not need an ADA medical assistance service dog. And we've seen that through the 20 years that I've been working in and helping not only myself find my way back after service and figure out who I am now that I'm no longer a Marine and all this other stuff, was that the majority of veterans really liked having a dog. And it was one of the most common stories I heard from all eras, whether it was, the Cold War, the Gulf War, Vietnam War, even World War II. Like, the one of the most common stories I heard from previous veterans was how much that dog meant to them. And what I attribute it to is what we miss, what we struggle with the most after service is not so much what we saw in combat per se. It's that missing that team and not having that fire team or that those people to your left and your right that sometimes we disagree or we don't align in a lot of our thought processes, but we've all taken an oath that we're there, especially in the Marines. Like, our motto is Semper Fidelis, which is always faithful. And the culture that the Marines have built is more like a mafia type culture where you're in it for life. And that's what we're trying to bring back in with Sierra Delta is that you can still be a badass after service, and still continue to serve, and you can still find that buddy again, but this time we're going to associate it with the dog. And really, because there's so many dogs out there that need help, we kill 800,000 healthy and trainable adoptable dogs every year. And what we're trying to get America in general by focusing on the veterans is, hey, you don't need to be in a 5-year wait list to get some dog that is bred in test tubes and made for this type. We can generate this on our own. And it also, by the veterans being a part of the training aspect throughout those 2 years that it takes to get to that level, really fills a void and gives that sense of accomplishment. And it does provide a stronger bond. But this is not to say that for somebody with severe, let's put that out there, severe medical issues. And listen, I lost my leg in Iraq, and I don't need a dog to go with me everywhere. I lost 5 friends. But if you do, you do. And let's make sure you get the right dog. But I've worked with over 20,000 vets, and the people, once we explain what we do at Sierra Delta, and this is my career, we've only helped about 2,000 vets so far since 2017, since we founded it. But even the majority of the vets that we work with, and we explain the program, we explain our goals, they understand that, yeah, I don't need an ADA medical assistant service dog. I need a dog trained to my individual needs and individual lifestyle. And that can open up the door to a whole bunch of other different types of breeds, different types of, even the rescue dogs. As long as we have professional trainers and then the commitment from the veterans, which when I first started this out, most of the service dog professionals told me that the veterans won't follow what you say. And I was like, and we have seen the exact opposite. People are grateful to get help with training. Sometimes it's only basic obedience.
Yeah.
Other times it's, little things like a dog already knows that if you're crying or if you're upset, that they sense our emotions so much faster than people. And so it's just a matter of training the human as to how the dog can help, not so much training the dog, but we need to get their hand and arm signals down. So it's all communication. And then when you look at that's the basis of any relationship, right? And
Yeah.
so by the dogs not being able to understand our words without the conditioning, that helps us also be better in other relationships as well.
Gosh, that is so amazing because nobody's slipping through the cracks in
Right.
the model that you've got.
Right. And the
Because
thing is that we're reducing the cost. So if you look at the Pause Act that was just passed by the government, and listen, we need our government, but we can't rely on our government to help with these social issues. And I mean, we can see by the lackluster performance of the VA in my entire lifetime, right? And it's not to say that the people there aren't trying hard and aren't working hard and aren't valuable, because they are. What's broken is the process. And what's broken is the fact that I have to go and prove to the VA every 5 years that my leg hasn't grown back. Like that's just ridiculous. And then the amount of emotional stress and just what that the bureaucracy creates, and then the outcomes are not what we want. That's why we don't look for government grants for this program. We lean heavily on the goodwill of people to fund this. And we're about to roll out a membership program for non-veterans. So a minimum donation of $200 a year gets you into the club. And you can see digitally all the information that we're sharing with the vets, all the routines that we're coming up with, and that the veterans are coming up with themselves and sharing on how it's making a difference. And also all the different trainers that we're using to help these veterans get to that level of building this life buddy team to their individual needs and their individual lifestyle, that now these civilians can also see and book these same trainers who we are working on to build out a discount program, right? So you can go on be a member of Sierra Delta for a minimum of $200 a year, and then hopefully be connected with some services in your own area, seeing what veterans are doing to kind of help navigate this world, right? Because
Mhm.
everybody in this country probably has PTSD, especially after the last few years in this country, right? And if you
Oh,
don't, you aren't paying
you
attention.
are yeah, you are so onto something here because and that's what I've been so grateful. the way that just as I went out looking for stories, like
Yeah,
hopeful stories coming out of the last my North Star is, generational healing, and I
yeah,
think it comes through these stories of us being real and talking about the hard things that we've been through, and when I started looking for those stories, immediately, I was connected to veterans, like, they
yeah,
just started coming out of the woodwork, I'm like, "Okay," and then what I realized, you hear from these veterans and the things you guys have seen and been through, and it sets such an amazing example for everyone else out there that's like, wow, if these guys are willing to stand up and share their stories and the ways that they have turned a struggle into strength, man, it sets the example for everybody else. And you're right. Everything everyone's going through the same struggle on some level. The
yeah,
story's a little different, but the mental health battle, the physical health battle, these things are real across the
and
board.
that's just a
And
human.
yeah.
It's what happens when you're a life form on Earth. I think we've gotten so comfortable, so complacent that we forget that life is hard. It's tomorrow's not guaranteed to any of us. And so I was in the Marine Corps infantry, and so there's a mindset that you have to even volunteer for that, and there's a mindset you have to adapt to if you want to be successful in that role. And it's literally improvise, adapt, and overcome. You know, everybody thinking that whoever we elect is going to fix it. It's not true, and it's never been true in the history of the world. What matters is what we do. And that's where, when we started Sierra Delta, it was more service dogs for heroes slash veterans. And now we're pivoting to service dogs, veterans. And we're building a wellness community around service to others, the love of dogs, and supporting our veterans because we're shrinking, right? There's not as many of us anymore. And that's a good thing because we don't, wars are dumb. Let's just say it. Like, it's just gotten dumb. And you even see like the people are less and less violent every year. And we have to come to terms with this fact because we also have to really realize our language, right? Because right now in America, what is really bothersome to me, what's bothersome to a lot of other veterans, is how cavalier everybody is about fighting when the majority of these people in this country have never been in a fight in their life. And we're talking like we're all big and bad and we're bullying each other with language because we know as soon as someone gets violent, then we can arrest them and put them in jail. Well, that's not going to last long. We've got to figure out a way to communicate better, and that's one of the things that as a trained social worker, what I'm trying to focus on is how to help people communicate better. And the thing is the one thing that I know that everyone in this country can agree on at a very high percentage rate, like 90, 95%, is dogs. So let's start around dogs first and then try to incentivize people to give their time, their talents, their treasure in other service capacities. So, like, we have a partnership with Habitat for Humanity that we're growing out. We have a partnership with the Street Dog Coalition that provides, pop-up veterinary care for people that are homeless and at risk of homelessness. And then just an old-fashioned working party that we're developing with the National Cemetery Associations because all of these veterans, military people that have died throughout our nation's history and have been buried in these national cemeteries, they're under disrepair. We don't have budget for it. And we don't have the civic groups and the schools coming out to do that service anymore. So instead of protesting and trying to get Congress to pass some other worthless bill, let's just set the time and let's just make it a fun thing to do. Let's put rewards around it and let's get some wellness out of getting some soap and water and washing these headstones. There's nothing
That's
to it.
so true, and it's so what we focus on grows. That's just
Yeah.
something that I completely the more I live, I
Yeah.
know there's energy and there are places we waste it, and the less places we waste our energy and the more positive that we look toward, that's what happens. And that's what I love about your story is just what you guys are doing and connecting the nonprofit world and not competing
Right.
against the growing tide of goodness that is out there. And
Right.
that's the whole reason I started this. I'm like, why are the stories we're hearing the one that's not what I see when I walk around in the world. But
Right.
then I was like, nobody's telling these stories. Like
No.
all we're hearing is how bad it is, which reinforces that in our bodies, minds, and spirits. And then that's going to become. But yet these stories and connecting with all these nonprofits where everybody can win and, lift up and work from their strengths, that's what you guys are doing. It's amazing. And
Well,
I'd love Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I mean, everybody I've ever met wants to be the good guy in their own story.
Yeah.
Even when I did, internships for different social work projects as I was getting my degree, working as a veteran service officer, and sometimes having to go to jails to work with veterans, the men and women in those jails still they want to be the good guy in their own story. And I'm not forgiving anybody for, real crimes that they've committed, but what are we trying to do? What is the society that we want to build? Because I'm one of the most flawed humans on this planet, and I've been lucky enough to get a lot of, you know, second chances, but that's because I came from a place of like, you know what, I was wrong. This was wrong, and you're sincere about it, and then you got to do the work. At the end of the day, that's what really bothers me about the amount of things that we are quote unquote protesting. It's not that I mean I'm a big believer in the First Amendment. So if you want to protest, go protest, but put some umph behind it. Show me the work that's being done to actually make that change. Be the change you want to be in the world. A lot of times what we say is be the person your dog thinks you are. You know?
Beautiful. It's so true. The way they look at you,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
so true.
Right.
That is Yeah, I would love to circle back a little bit and just, share with people how your personal story,
Yeah.
um, really led you to start Sierra Delta. So can we circle back a little bit on that?
Absolutely. So I joined the Marine Corps in 1996 after a failed year at the University of Georgia Southern. I went on the Hope Scholarship after graduating, from high school with C's and B's, right? But the Hope Scholarship gave me the opportunity to go to college, and I squandered it and didn't go to class and partied, and they politely asked me not to come back. And so instead of moving back home and instead of getting some factory job or working on wherever, I decided I wanted to go see the world. And, I was a rambunctious young man, and so I didn't mind fighting. And I looked around to see what was available, and the Marine Corps spoke to me, even though, I was probably voted the least likely to join the military after high school. I got kicked out of school, for disciplinary reasons. And I still have that. And I had that in the Marine Corps, and it actually was helpful. But I joined in 1996, went to Paris Island, and did 4 years in the fleet in the active duty United States Marine Corps. And in 2000, I decided that it was fun, but this was the 90s, and there was drawdowns, and everybody was thinking that we didn't need our military anymore. And as an infantryman, we were running around the woods yelling "bang bang" at each other. Like
Mhm.
so there was no blanks, there was no real good training, and I just saw like a whole bunch of wasted time. And I had things I wanted to do, but I loved the culture of the Marines. I loved what it took to earn the title of being a Marine. So I stayed in the Ready Reserves. And then in 2001, the towers go down. And here we are on the global war of terrorism, right? And so 2004, we were activated to go to Iraq and ran a lot of operations there until Thanksgiving night of 2004. I was hit by a roadside IED, the weapon of choice at that time. And it was three Russian-made 155 artillery shells. If anybody understands that nomenclature, I doubt it. But basically, a big boom killed my gunner Ryan Contafio from Beaver Dam instantly, and then left me without a without my left foot, which eventually left me without my lower left leg, and ended up retiring me from the Marine Corps as a disabled veteran in 2005, which was a hard pill to swallow. It become so much of my identity. I turned 28 in Longstuhl in the hospital in Longstuhl, Germany, and I wasn't prepared. And it's nobody's fault. You know, when you're getting ready to go into a combat zone, you think about, going there, getting the job done, or not coming home, right? You don't really think about the in between, and nor should you. I mean, I really want to make that part clear in the fact that um, there's only so much preparation we can do. And the great thing is I came back, I have a big family. Had a lot of friends, a lot of coworkers that were all there and really helped me even if I wasn't in the mood to be helped, right? And I did have some struggles and we'll get into that. But what the point I wanted to make is that sometimes to try to keep bad things from happening, we actually hurt ourselves. The mindset that I had of either accomplishing the mission or dying is the exact right mindset that you need in order to be successful.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Because it's those little fear points that hold us
Yeah,
back, right?
exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
the 6 inches between our ears is where 90% of our reality is. And if we can learn how to harness that with working with others and being humble, which is hard, right? Our egos can get in the way, our minds can get in the way, but we have to be purposeful in that. And then also when you're trying to help other people, you have to be clear to not cross that boundary and get in the way of their own development, no matter how long it takes them.
Yeah, yeah. We can't do for them. I mean, it takes your confidence away.
It
It's like
does.
if someone comes in and says, "Here, let me do that for you." All of a sudden you're sitting back going, "Oh, wait, I guess I wasn't capable of that myself."
Right. And that was the thing that it took me a while to recognize is that, struggling with now being a disabled person, no longer being the Marine and a bunch of other things that were going on in life. Like what I was noticing is everybody that came and helped me just made that hole in me bigger. And I wasn't mad at them. I was more mad at me. And then that pressure you put on yourself. But then once you can be honest with it and once you can kind of tame that help and you can try to figure out ways to where, no, I need you to help me, but let me get to this point first, or let me get to here. Those are some of the things, but there are times when somebody does need to just come in and give you that splash of cold water, if you will, to
Mhm.
slap across the face. So it's not always doing things for people because then that creates dependency, right? And the one thing that we need to generate more from ourselves and from our people that we love is more of the independence, right? Allowing people to be themselves, even if you don't like it, right? If you love them, you should be able to occupy the same space, and that's what's really frustrating right now in our country is that it feels like we can't be different anymore. But if you turn off all the other stuff and you just focus on the people when you're in person, it doesn't exist. So it's I don't know. It's
Yeah,
kind of hard to figure
yeah.
out what true north is, but
It's
I think the best way to get there is to talk about it openly.
I totally agree, and I think removing the shame and the stigma from so
Right,
many of these stories and just saying like, "Gosh, we've all messed up. We've all had moments where we did something that we wish we wouldn't have done or we said something."
right,
And when we sweep that stuff under the rug instead of, bringing it out into the light and learning from it and then letting that help other people, because that's where that human connection comes from.
yeah,
It's not in the, "Hey, I'm so great. Look at me." It's those moments that like, this is where I messed up and look what I learned from it.
sure,
And yeah, and you see that, I mean, coming from the social work side, I mean, that's got to be such an interesting place to have all that knowledge and yet with the military background, you don't see that very often. And to have the
yeah,
way I'm wondering this the way that those mindsets come together, like, can you share a little bit? I mean, you were, but what you've learned in
yeah.
mixing those 2 mindsets?
Well, it's actually been really, really useful. Uh,
Yeah.
so going through it too. So I mean, being in a hospital, going through multiple surgeries, having a very important part of your body missing and having to figure out ways to overcome that every day, it is challenging. I'm not going to try to sweep that under the rug. And I didn't respond to it in the most um, appropriate way each time. And still, there's times where I have pitfalls, right? So early on, I was angry, right? So obviously, drinking too much, looking for ways to kind of reestablish, I guess, my masculinity, my Marine Corps, whatever it is, and doing it in a lot of unhealthy ways. I was also in a bad relationship that ended up in a bad divorce, but I had two kids that I loved dearly, and ended up getting a DUI at one point in time that could have ended the career that I had at craft. And I really hit a low point, going through a bankruptcy, divorce, facing DUI charges that's going to end this career. And I honestly thought about checking out and just being like, listen, this world would be better off without me. And I could rationalize everything else away except for this old English bulldog that I bought on my very first convalescent leave from Walter Reed, and I bought it off Craigslist, bought him off Craigslist. And, knowing what I know about dogs, I probably didn't get him in the appropriate way, but I'm glad I did because he was critical in me adopting this new mindset afterwards, where I looked in the mirror and then I realized that if I off myself, that Dozer, which was his name, Bulldozer, right? Kid from
Love
Georgia, was a
it.
Georgia Bulldog fan, and the Marine
Yep.
Corps mascot is a bulldog, so very stereotypical. But you know, everybody else would have been better off without me. But he would end up in a shelter and most likely be killed because he's a big, mean-looking bulldog that had no special breeding, no special talents. I mean, he can get slobber into places you thought was physically impossible to get slobber into, right? He could clear a room with his farts, but outside of that, I mean, the one good talent he had, and I don't know how he did, was he always somehow knew when I was having a phantom pain, the pains that you get after amputation, where it feels like the foot that used to be there is either in pain, sometimes it's itching, that's the worst. It feels like your ankle's itching and there's nowhere to scratch. He could always sense that even if he was in a different room and he would come and he would get up on me and he was the best medicine for that. But it was because of him that I was able to take a step back and then realize, no, this isn't the right choice. I've got to figure this out. This is nobody else's problem but mine. And that's when I came up with this good foot mantra that no matter, which foot was bearing my weight, whether it was the prosthetic and titanium, prosthetic of carbon fiber and titanium, or if it was my God given foot, I was going to live my life on the good foot, just like the James Brown song talked about. I got a funky job and I'm paying my bills on the good foot, right?
Yeah.
And so I
I
was
love
able to start piecing things together. I wrote letters to everybody I knew to help me convince law enforcement and the judicial system that I wasn't a bad guy and that I needed a second chance. And they heard me and they heard everybody else, and I'm grateful for that. We're able to knock it down to a reckless driving, and I was able to get the divorce behind me, get to the bankruptcy behind me, and rebuild. And realized then that I didn't want to be in the corporate game, and so I left college with only about a semester left to get a business degree, and left Kraft Foods, and then switched over and got a psychology degree, and eventually a master's in social work from the University of Southern California, and fight on for the Trojans, right? And then went and started working at different veteran organizations and really trying to put this all together. And having the social work background along with the infantry skills that I had of the military really helped me see some of the challenges that my community or the veteran community were up against, but they also spill over into other communities that are struggling in our society right now, and seeing it in a different way and figuring out different ways to attack it. And one of the things that I knew always drove me was the sense of accomplishment, the sense of achievement, the sense of reward. And as I looked around to these social programs, I kept seeing like it's all gotcha, or if you do this, then this will happen to you. And so people were giving up, and rightfully so. Where is the light at the end of the tunnel? I mean, for me, it was Dozer that showed me that no, my family's not going to be better off without me. It was that. So how are we going to get that in place to help people help themselves? Because that's essentially what a role of a social worker is, to meet them where they're at and to help them help themselves, utilizing the resources that they have within them, within their network, and in their community. And so that's what I think makes a difference. I'm lucky enough that on my team here at Sierra Delta, I have another combat experienced veteran who's also a social worker, and I talk about it openly to veterans that are kind of lost in their way. Stop looking at security, stop looking at law enforcement, look in ways that we can take the skill sets that we have and bring them into these communities that are challenged for whatever reason, and help them find the strategic ways out. because everybody's got strengths and weaknesses, right? And so one of the things that we really try to focus on first is what's your strengths? Where can we start, right?
Oh, that gives me the chills. I think this world needs to be teaching people to work from their strengths. We are so prone to looking at what we need to get better at,
Right.
what we're weak, where's our deficiency, and then letting that be something that defines us or keeps us down. And
Right.
then, like you say, everybody's got strengths. I love to do like character assessments with
Yeah.
kids. And say, man, look at you. Like, you're so great at forgiveness or
Yeah.
whatever should like just giving those little insights to work from, your God-given strengths,
Yeah.
it changes the game.
And it's
Doesn't matter
hard.
what organization.
And it's hard. I'm not going to say that it's not because I can get down on myself. I can prone to depression, whether it's through the amount of head injuries that I've had and all the
Yeah,
other things, or if it's just part of the human condition. It doesn't really matter, right?
right.
It's my issue. I've got to figure it out, is what I always say. And I need to reach out to others to help, but it has to start with me. But one of the things I've always said was, C's equal degrees, right? Like we don't have to get straight A's. No one's ever asked me for my GPA, right? But
Yeah.
we don't need to be perfect at everything. It's funny. I first met President Bush in the hospital, and we kept up a relationship. And then when he did Portraits of Courage, he asked if he could paint me, and I said, absolutely. And we were at an event together, and I had just graduated with my master's in social work. And he was super proud of me, and he was introducing me, and he's like, he calls me Belushi. That's my nickname. And he's like, there's Belushi over there. He just graduated with his master's in social work. You got straight A's, right, Belushi? I was like, no, sir. C's equal degrees. Like sometimes you just got to get it done. And failing isn't bad. You know, Sierra Delta, like we were founded in 2017. We started out as Service Dogs for Heroes, and then we had another organization sue us, and that's when I was like, listen, I'm not trying to speak to the people, I'm trying to speak to veterans. So I changed it to Sierra Delta and using the NATO alphabet so that they understood this is service dogs. But then as we got in there and we saw that the capacity to make these service dogs is very limited. I mean, right now, if you were to add up all the organizations in the entire country producing service dogs, they're only producing about 1,000 a year for military veterans. And the estimated need out of the 18 million veterans that exist in this country is 150,000 that need a medical assistant ADA service dog. That means we're on pace to solve this problem in 150 years. That's crazy. This is
Yeah,
America. We're supposed to be in, the cowboys, the ones that can figure it out and make things happen, right? And so as I started looking at it, I was like, well, wait, is it really service dogs that we need, or is it dogs? And then when I was going through cancer, I was diagnosed with lymphoma, stage 2 nodular lymphocyte predominant Hodgkin's lymphoma in 2018. And as I was going through chemo and having to be quarantined before the quarantine was a thing, um, I was thinking about Dozer, who also died in 2018.
mhm,
So it was, and that's when I realized, like, wait, why I have all these exposures, I have all these injuries, I have all the all the different things, right? And I
mhm,
don't need a dog to go everywhere with me. And most of the people I know that even have these dogs that can go everywhere with them don't take them everywhere, right? When
mhm.
we're going to different events to dogs, I was like, where's your dog? Well, he's at home because it's more of a pain in the butt. And it's true. It's a pain to have a dog with you everywhere, which is what I was saying. Like, well, why does it have to be one or the other? Let's create the full spectrum dog, if you
Yeah,
will. And that's when Life Buddy was born, was in chemo treatment. And then I came out and said, no, let's just help all the vets with various different dogs and let them choose. And let's use professional trainers because, oh, by the way, it only takes 2 years of training to become a qualified and ethical dog trainer. So we can produce more dog trainers way faster than we can produce doctors, way faster than we can produce pharmacists, right? And the dog needs to be outside. The dog gives you instant feedback. The dog has nothing better to do than to be around you. And the most common story I've heard about people not really killing themselves is because of something like that, a dog. A lot of times it's family too, but a lot of times it's the dog to something that needs you. right?
Yeah.
And that's an important part for when people are struggling is that nobody wants to be the charity case. Nobody truly wants to be the victim, I don't think. Now, it seems like there's a big victim mentality going around, but it doesn't lead anywhere. I've never seen a successful victim in my life. Anybody that's ever overcome anything has decided to not be the victim anymore and to be the victor. And that's what we need to start meeting people is like, we understand where you're at now, but our goal should be to get you out of here. And that's the problem with how we're delivering our services, in my opinion, to our veterans, is that we are creating mechanisms for them to be dependent on a system to maintain their identity, to maintain their health coverage, to maintain all this stuff versus giving them rewards to get better and then also to get re-engaged with their community and bring what I think our civilians need to hear our stories and to be engaged with veterans more, which is why we stood up the Life Force program and centered everything around service to others, was to build that bridge. Because it does take a different mentality to say, yes, I'll go and I will go to these and places that nobody really wants to go to, where you're going to see really hard things, you're going to have to do really hard things. But for me, a lot of my PTSD is I miss that. I miss being that guy that was there and being with the other guys. And that's my unit was all male. So when I say guys, I mean that because that's what I experienced, right? But I understand that women can do it as well. But that's important because it's that sense of accomplishment. Again, it's something that is you can't give that to anybody else. And nobody can take it away from me. Like at the end of the
Right.
day, no one can take that away from me. I did that and that's where we need to go back and recenter these veterans on this is what you did. And this is how we can do things in that same light and how you can help recruit other people to you and make the change, make the difference in that way.
Yeah. I mean, I remember the first time we talked and you drew that distinction between the VA and being an active duty service member and that mission-driven approach
Right.
just being the rug being pulled out from under you when you get home and
Hmm.
saying like your mission's gone and then you're put that mindset is the dead opposite of what you guys
Right.
were training and
And
what made you great. I hope you're enjoying this conversation on What I Meant to Say, produced by my company, Be Better Media. To see the world of why we are striving to share inspired edutainment, I invite you to please check out our website, bebettermedia.tv. Here you will find all kinds of great stuff from upcoming new productions to lifestyle products and services I personally use and endorse, to links to great books and other podcasts I love and recommend. Please check us out at bebettermedia.tv. That's bebettermedia.tv.
right. And then you look at the VAs only working with 30% of the total amount of vets. So they've created a false gate. And so then you have people, veterans killing themselves trying to get into the system to get any type of help. And it's not working. And that's where Sierra Delta, we're one of the few nonprofits that are centered towards veterans that is open to every single vet. And again, what I'm most proud is that here soon we're going to open ourselves up to the civilians to join, to be a part of be on the team. They're not going to be eligible for the training grants that we give out and a few other little things that'll be just for the veterans, but that's okay because the veterans have earned it, and I think most of the other civilians agree. So to break it down, for every 5,000 people we can get to commit to Sierra Delta $200 annually. That gives us $1 million to put towards training grants. If we get 25,000 people to say, yes, I will give Sierra Delta $200 a year, which is nothing anymore, right? It's
Right,
one dinner out for a family of four at these prices, right?
right,
Dedicate one of those a year to Sierra Delta at 25,000 people, that's $25 million. And if we can maintain that for 7 years, I think we solve this whole problem. And not only are veterans in a better headspace with a better community and with a better bridge to our civilians, and the civilians better understand what veterans do and can feel more connected to us. we might not kill as many healthy, trainable, and adoptable dogs to boot, which is a great side effect.
Oh gosh, yeah. I
So,
mean, you are so on it's brilliant, and what you reminded me of, I don't know how often you go through LAX, and I don't know if you've heard of Homeboy Industries, but
oh,
he
the baking with
yeah,
the prison,
yeah,
yeah,
they
it's
take the
amazing.
parolees
Yeah,
yeah, and they have a big quote up on their wall in the little cafe that's now in the new, terminal at LAX. It says, "Not us and them, just us."
yeah,
And what you're doing with the veterans and the civilians and the dogs, stop parceling everybody off into their little
yeah,
group. We're all human and connected to that canine community. Our animals are the next, that
yeah.
those relationships, like you say, and the way they play into our human relationships. All the things you're connecting there are so universal to being
Mhm.
human, not
Exactly.
being a certain kind of human,
Nope,
just being human.
that's right.
And yeah, it's just
And the
genius.
great thing is that it's still one of the most searched things on the internet is cats and dogs, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, we wanna see it. We wanna see dogs, like, dogs, they do make life better, like, if you're going through mental struggles, physical struggles, spiritual whatever your struggle is, you're gonna have to walk through hell to get to the other side. There's no pill, there's no quick fix, there's no video you can watch that's gonna make it better, but you're gonna have to go through your own personal hell. And in my experience, it's a lot easier to go through hell with a dog because even in the worst situations, the dog kind of looks at you and like, yeah, it's all right until it's not all right, right?
Yep.
And that's a good thing, And but what we really try to focus on is how those lessons these dogs can teach us can translate into our communication with other people. And again, I think the basic breakdown in our society right now, it doesn't have as much to do with morals and all that. It has to do with communication, and we're not taking our language seriously, and so it's making it even harder for different types of people in our world to communicate. And when you work with a dog, there's only so much language you can use, right? It's no different than as a Marine Corps infantryman, we were in Iraq or you're in Afghanistan or you're in Yemen, wherever you're at. You don't know that language. You do your best to get some of the quick verbiage, and you're also working with translators, but you those type skills are necessary because there's the human expression. There's so much more to language besides the words we use.
Oh, yeah.
And by focusing that on a dog who we want to impress, right? And who the dog wants to impress us, right?
Yeah.
If we can get that and then extract those lessons learned from the dog and yourself into your other relationships and understand, finding the motivation for the dog is how you're going to train the dog, right? When I first got my new dog is Loki. He's a dog I got from a rescue, and someone tried to starve him to death. They were raising German shepherds, but he's not full-blooded German shepherd. He's got collie and they think bloodhound in him, and so he has this big white collar around his neck, and he didn't look like a purebred German Shepherd. So the plan was for whoever was, breeding dogs was to just leave him in a cage and let him starve. And someone stole him and turned him in. He was 40 pounds underweight, just a basket, a ball of anxiety. And he spoke to me. And it took some while. I've had him for over 2.5 years now, and he's a really good dog. And it took time, but at the beginning, he wasn't food motivated, right? So you have to figure out what motivates him and in order to communicate the good and the bad, because you don't punish the dog when they don't do something well, you ignore them. And so understanding that, and then that can help translate. And what I've seen from the people that have been in Sierra Delta for the longest is you see that transpiring in their own lives. And I've had letters from parents and wives and husbands and friends, and when we go to events, this person was such a way, and because of this dog and because of the program and because of this, they are now a different way, because we're never going to go backwards and be who we were, but we can be that new version of ourselves with enough investment and enough um, planning and just deciding in our minds that that's who we're going to be no matter what it takes. And essentially that's the mindset to get through Marine Corps boot camp, to get through being in a combat zone, is that I'm going to get through this no matter what it's taken. I'm making sure that the people to my left and my right are with me.
Gosh, that speaks to everything you're saying just speaks to me so wholeheartedly. I love it. But and it really gets to that message that of generational learning and healing that
Exactly.
I'm trying to it just is that's what gets me up every day. And
Yeah,
I see people who take agency in their own lives and like what the way you're describing it, it's required of all of us.
yeah.
And I'm wondering, what you think about how that agency that we take in our own lives spills out into the world and into our families, our communities. Like what do you see in that regard?
I can see when I allow myself to get angry or if my anxiety gets the best of me, that everything around me also starts to break down. And that was in that moment of my most biggest desperation was the epiphany I had, whether it was inspired by Dozer, whether it was inspired by whatever, was that at the end of the day, the world I live in is mine. And I have to make these changes before I can get mad at anybody else. Now, there's plenty of times where I forget. There's plenty of times when, you know, the madness of the world can break through my fortress of solitude, like I like to call it, like Superman had, and eke in, and then you get fear and you get, the anxieties take over, and your worst possible scenario you think is maybe coming true, and then everybody else is reacting different, right? And the times when I'm at my best, when I am more sound and I can slow the world down in my mind and I'm eating right and I'm getting enough sleep and I'm exercising and I'm reading and I'm doing all the things that we know are good, but we get into slumps and we get into depressions that throw the rhythm off. But when I'm at my best and everything else around me is at my best too. And I can change it. Like if I'm in the right mindset when I walk into a situation and it's somewhat chaotic, I can bring it back into line by believing that I can and by hearing where they're at and then saying, I hear you, but have you thought of this, right? Instead of trying to tell people, and that's one of the things that I always have to get better at is sometimes the way I see things, I try to jump ahead to what I think they need to know instead of asking the question that helps them get to that point, the same point, right? Because I don't like to be told things, right? Like I don't like to be told what to do. The best way to get me to do anything is tell me I can't do it, right? I'd never dreamed of running a marathon and never had any desire until they're like, well, you're going to have trouble running, missing a leg. Oh, yeah, hold my beer, right?
I love it. It's so great.
So, you know, but again, it's hard, right? We have more information coming at us than any other humans ever experienced in the whole history of human history. And our brains cannot process it fast enough. And then you add in the fact that now we're throwing in AI that can generate stuff and you can manipulate the information in ways that I mean, maybe we thought about it when we were watching Star Trek back in the 70s, but there's no way that we're living in this world. And how do you decipher what's real, what's not real, what
Yeah.
relationships are real, both digitally
Yeah.
and in
I
reality?
know. Yeah,
And we
getting back to that human connection.
Exactly, and then that's what you have to do is you have to learn from, again, like, generational health, like, if you're talking about, like, obviously, you're a parent as well, I'm a parent, and I know there's times when we think, like, "Am I screwing up my kid by doing this?" I mean, we're gonna influence our kids, we're the biggest influences out there, right? And my family, my origin story, I say all the time, is complicated, but what I do know is I was loved. And even if they made mistakes, we have to forgive. And I think that forgiveness plays a huge part, and that's where I've never held any animosity towards, you know, having cancer or losing my leg. I signed up for the Marine Corps. I knew full well what I was getting into, or at least well enough, right? And at the end of the day, I made the choice. And that's sometimes I think we forget when we're in certain situations that, we're here because of us. And we can try to blame things and issues that came before us or things that made our life harder. But at the end of the day, the choice to come to the other side is still ours.
Yeah.
And that's a powerful thing to have in your repertoire, in your toolkit, so to speak,
Yeah.
if I can speak social work wise.
Yeah.
But it's also really easy to forget. It's really easy to get caught up in all the other information that's coming our way. And that's where it's important to develop, I think, communities that can both translate digitally and analogically, like, in the real world, right? And that's why we're building Sierra Delta the way it is that it's a digital wellness program focused on service to others and the love of dogs. And then we're testing out with the VFW and the American Legion here in Wisconsin first. But the goal is that they have, between just those two organizations, 18,001 clubhouses across this country in both urban and rural areas. And so if we can find a way to work together around the dog issues and veterans, and then we can start inviting people to in-person events around all kinds of things. We're working with yoga studios. We're working with, so many other holistic ways of even the cannabis stuff, but there's so many other holistic things that are out there,
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
acupuncture, chiropractic, just
All of it, all
all
of it. And you know
whatever it
what?
is.
It's a
Yeah.
little different for each person, but you just blew my mind because I was picturing, as you said, the VFWs on my way to yoga every morning. I
Mhm.
drive past the VFW, make my left-hand turn, and go down to my yoga studio. And you just said, VFWs working with yoga studios. I'm like, you can start to see
Yeah.
when you get in this world, it all works together.
It does. The
Mm,
infrastructure's there. We just need
yeah.
to reorganize it, right? And that's what we're trying to do at Sierra Delta. What blew my mind is I did a quick search on the IRS website to figure out how many veteran-centric nonprofits exist. And this was a couple years ago. At the time, there was 48, or just over 48,000 veteran-centric nonprofits. And there's just over 18 million veterans left, which 12 million of those 18 million are 55 and older, with another 4 million of that 12 million being 75 and older. So you can see we're aging out, we're shrinking. And at any
Mhm.
given time, we only have 2 million on active and reserve at any given time. And that number has been pretty stable for the past 10, 15 years. And I see it actually going down in the future, not up. So when you divide 46 or 48,000 by 18 million, you come up with that each nonprofit only needs to work with uh, 360 vets to touch every single vet. So that means if each nonprofit focused on touching a different vet every day for 360 days, we would touch every single vet. We can get it done in a year. And so, as much as we like to showcase how the VA is not being as effective, us in the nonprofit world aren't either. And it comes down to that there's no connection point between the nonprofits. And that's what we need to try. I mean, we need to have business because everything's a business, right? At the end of the day,
And
everything is a business because you have to manage the resources that go into it.
yeah,
But we can be so much stronger. We don't have to be a conglomerate, but if
right.
we can be an alliance, right? And we know, and like what we focus on is service to others and the love of dogs, right? And just building a wellness community. If somebody else focuses on running or somebody else focuses on, workshops or employment, and somebody else focuses on building the houses and helping with disability, like you can have all this stuff, but then we should all come together like the Knights of the Round Table and King Arthur. And
Yeah.
no, there's no hierarchy, right? We get caught up in labels and we get caught up in who gets what credit. At some point in time, we have to put the credit aside. And then at the end of the day, we're a nonprofit. So there's nobody should be making anything. All the profits go back into the program so that the programs are as successful as they can be. But we still need to pay for the talent. And that's one thing that I'm really trying to get people to understand is when you're judging your nonprofit, judge them off of the outcomes, not so much on the financials. Now, that's a big component to it, but it's not the only component. Because if it was just as easy as giving people a lot of money, we all would have been better a long time ago because there's oftentimes you hand money and it just doesn't work. What we
Yeah.
got to create is the program, is the pathway. right?
Yeah.
And that is going to take resources. And then we need to use some of that money as carrots in various different ways, not just in cash money, but in rewards. So, you think about some of these brands that are out there. Like right now, we're in Walmart
Mm.
for the third time, and it's a phenomenal program in our partnership with our corporate sponsor, Blue Buffalo. So every time someone buys a bag of Blue Buffalo from Walmart, a dollar comes back to Sierra Delta for us to put towards what we do. Now Walmart has also included us in their Spark for Good. So now when people shop walmart.com, they can round up at the end of the day, and then that money comes to us. They can also buy some gift cards to donate to us that we can use as rewards to the veterans for what they do. So you can see there's multiple different ways. And then one of the biggest ways people can help, especially our nonprofit, is to share it on social media, is to talk about it. When people ask, well, how can I get involved? Well, you can organize an event. You can contact us and say that you want to have a golf outing, or you want to do a dog walk, or you want to do, we have a meat raffle coming up next month from a local thing. I think it's amazing. Like there's there's no wrong way to support. The one thing that I will always push back is, what is it that you're going to do? If you're expecting me to have a job ready for you in a volunteer capacity so you can feel better for yourself, that's not really helping me. And I don't mean to do that disparagingly, right? We
Makes so
all,
much sense.
yes, we all have time, talent, and treasure, right? And so if we can readjust the way we look at nonprofits, because we've become a little bit cynical, it feels like, towards nonprofits, and rightfully so in some aspects. But there's a lot of nonprofits that are either doing really good work or striving to do good work. And we do need more people to get involved, but we need them to get involved, not just show up and like, hey, I'm here, put me to work. Because if I got to show you what to do, then I'm no longer able to do what I need to do. Right.
Yeah.
And what is the value that you bring into this? And then how can you, like, if someone would say, BJ, this is how I can help you, like, that's like me winning the lottery, right? Versus BJ, how can I help?
Yeah.
Here we go again, right?
Yeah, they just created a job for
Yeah,
you that you didn't
exactly. Yeah,
for.
yeah. And it's
And
simple. This is dogs, right? This is dogs and people getting together. So even if you wanted to have a dinner party, have a dinner party, right? And we can let one of our vets know if you want our vet to show up and tell a story. Like we're creating this ambassador program so that, again, I'm looking to the vets and like, hey, people want to help. They want to help us. Like we need
yeah,
to take our brand back, and we need to show people how they can help us, but then we also need to show them how we can help them. So then it doesn't feel one-sided, right? Because
right.
we all have a lot of value as well, and stories
Yeah,
that you're not going to hear. So, I encourage everybody to get involved with Sierra Delta or another nonprofit that is very important to you, but bring your ideas, because anything can work. If you like it, there's probably at least another 200, 400, maybe even thousands of people that have the same idea, right? And pretty much your network is probably like-minded like you. So you probably already have what you need to get started.
yeah. So true. And you're bringing one of my favorite quotes back to my head. I think it was Truman that said, "Doesn't it's amazing what you can get done when you don't care who gets the credit."
Right. 100%. You know,
And there's a messenger for everybody.
that's
And
right.
so whatever you connect to, go out and connect to it wholeheartedly and bring your strengths
That's right.
because makes
Be the
such a
change you want
difference.
to be in the world. I think that was Gandhi.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
It's when we boil down our problems to what's actually our problem and what's, not our problem, they are pretty easy to solve. But listen, like I said, I am a flawed human. And so I
Yeah.
struggle too. I get in my own head. And then again, it's conversations. Again, it's being able to be vulnerable enough to be like, yeah, I thought about suicide once and I was really close. And here's why. And then here's what got me through it, right? I still get depressive. I mean, I'm in pain a lot, and there's other things I could be doing. I'm probably carrying 30 or 40 pounds too much, so that's probably affecting, my pain scale. So
Yeah.
it's also I need to be moving more in a purposeful manner. Not, you don't have to go to a gym per se to get healthy, but you do have to adopt more healthier lifestyles, and it does get hard, right? It takes
Yeah.
planning, it takes preparation, And oftentimes
Right.
we
But,
get
you
off.
know, incremental good. That's where that be better philosophy is just like a little bit at a time.
That's right.
Perfectionism will, you know, it just kills you. You
It's
know, you can't get it all right, but you can get a little bit more right every day.
That's right. And that's where the
Yeah,
C's equal degrees mindset that I always remind myself is just be this much better than you were bad, right? Just try to get one thing done at least that offsets the scale because you can't be good at everything, right? And you are
yeah,
going to make mistakes, and so long as you own them and learn from them, I think mistakes can be helpful. I mean, it's the way I learn best. Like I have to do things over and over and over again. It's hard for me to read a manual and then just
yeah,
know how to do it. Like I'm not that type person where I have to actually play with it
do it.
and
Yeah.
yeah, no.
So something's coming back to me because this world's gotten so political, and you having
Mhm.
brought up President Bush,
Yep.
you know, just being around somebody that's been to that level of service, of leadership, what's one or two things you would say that you gleaned from being around him?
The first thing, he's one of the hardest working men people I've ever been around. And I think that kind of surprised me because he kind of has this all shucks type personality, but he's early for everything. He makes sure everything stays on time. He remembers so much. Like, if you're with him long enough, like he'll remember the busboy at this restaurant that he was at a year ago that's still there. And that's um a trait that I've seen from a lot of people that I've met that are very successful, right? They're very organized, but at the same time, all these people are just like us. They still have to get up in the morning and they put their pants on one leg at a time. They do all the other things that we do, and they have the same struggles. That they've been able to work it. They've been able to navigate the pitfalls of the human spirit. They have good teams around them. Usually, these are the most
Huge.
common things that I see. And for President Bush, directly, like he's very grounded in his family, which is a breath of fresh air. And sometimes it's not always, especially with the politico types. I've met a lot of people that serve in DC, and it's one of those industries where that type of humanism is rare, especially nowadays.
Mhm.
So hopefully we can get back to those type people being in office again. But that was the thing that really struck me was how much he remembered of me and my story and the millions of people that he talks to daily, and everybody else that has gotten to know him pretty much says the same thing. And so I think that is powerful. It's one of the things that I try to emulate when I can, but then also recognizing that my strengths are different at times, and we can always try to get better. And that's when it comes back to that whole forgiveness part, especially self forgiveness.
Yep. Yeah, it does. Everything starts within you, for sure, for sure.
Right.
So one of my favorite question to ask everybody that comes on the podcast is just in search of that generational knowledge. What's a piece of advice you would give to your younger self?
Wow. My younger self. I mean, it almost seems like they're two different people, and they probably are. You know, I never knew my grandfather. So Johnny Ganem Sr. Started our family business in Savannah, Georgia, back in 1938, and he died in '72 on St. Patrick's Day coming up. And the advice that was passed down to me by people that worked for my grandfather that I always kind of adopted was we had a liquor store, right, and a restaurant, and so a lot of times people would come to us for their parties, and he had this one person that was trying to oversell this person on their party, and he pulled him in the back room and he told him, he's like, "Listen, you sell them exactly what they need, and whatever they don't use, you bring it back and you let them bring it back and give them a full refund." He goes, "We're not trying to get big sales here. We're trying to get all of their. We want them to come to us every time they have a party." And it's maintaining those relationships, and that was taught in my family. And I come from a big Middle Eastern family. We're all Lebanese, and so that was always, even if you're not blood relation, if you were close enough, I have aunts and uncles that probably aren't related to me. And so to my younger self, it's don't lose sight of that. Don't lose sight of the relationships and how important the other people are in your life, even if they're only in your life for a minute or two, right? Or even then. I think that the majority of my life, I've been able to live that way, which is why I've been able to, you know, get some of these things done that somebody like me probably would have been harder, right? Because not like I come from a ton of money or anything like that or a lot of influence, but I was able to just consistently do it. And I guess actually right there, that is the thing that I would tell myself is to be consistent. I think that sometimes you can start to, especially when you're younger, you can start to work at something and be like, oh, no one's really listening. No one, and then quit. And the thing is that you can't do that. And I didn't, especially being injured, that opened my eyes to that. Like, no, I'm going to figure this out one way or the other because I'm not going to be regulated to a wheelchair. I'm not going to be regulated to crutches or all that kind of stuff. So when you're kind of held your feet to the fire, you have to stay consistent. But I think that especially in this day and age, it's easy to get distracted. And so the message to my younger self would be to respect the relationships as always, like you were taught, but to stick with it, to stick it out. And I'm sure, I mean, a podcast, right? Like I think everybody has ideas to do it. And I think it's a great medium. And I think there's still room for a lot more. And um, you have to just put it out there and then take the feedback and then keep doing it. I haven't launched mine yet, but I've obviously put a lot of thought into it. But
Can't wait to see
yeah,
it.
I know. And it's just a matter of getting everything else done so that you have time to dedicate to it. Because I'm not going to start it unless we have prescribed recording days and all that other stuff. But yeah, that consistency to even if it's not working in the beginning, and that's what you saw with Sierra Delta. Like we started out just being medical assistant service dogs. And then we realized that that's really not going to do it was not going to affect the change that we wanted to see.
Yeah.
Not that those things are not important, it's we need to encompass the full spectrum, and that sometimes taking on something that big. When I first brought that idea out, a lot of people were like, no, 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 that's too much, we can't do it. And I was like, I think it's going to work out easier because then we always have a lane for someone to go down. And a lot of times with people already having dogs, we can at least start there, and if that satisfies the need and then bringing them into the community, then it does work because we don't know everything. The best laid plans of mice and men. I'm really not sure what that means, but I know it's a thing that's used a lot. So have your plan A, have your plan B, have your plan C, and then prepare to think on your feet even after that.
Absolutely. And one thing I noticed as you broke that all down that really impressed me was the way, I mean, you've got the numbers behind it. So I encourage people, and it's been something that I've been learning on the fly, excuse me. But when you have a goal,
Yeah,
you start breaking it down by the numbers.
yeah,
And I hear you doing that. And that's another thing I would say when people are looking for nonprofits, like
right.
the way you have those goals laid out, it's brilliant.
It's true.
It's tangible, it's something you can reach,
Right.
and then you can celebrate the little wins, like,
Yeah.
it's beautiful.
Well, that's just it. Like you don't need to hit home runs. I remember like baseball when Sammy Sosa and McGuire were. Everybody got caught up in the home runs, and then all of a sudden it was strikeouts or home runs, and laying down a bunt and moving people around. I mean, I don't follow baseball as much anymore, but there's so many things that make life good that isn't, you know, an island in the Caribbean. Like it can
Oh,
be. I find
get
so
it.
much joy here in Wisconsin. People are always like, "Why?" And I'm like, "It is beautiful. Yeah, it can be hard. It's cold, but there's beauty here. There's beauty everywhere I've gone. When I was in Iraq, there was beauty to be seen there. And I'm grateful for the time that I had in Iraq. And I'm grateful for the experience that I had and meeting the people in Iraq and the men, the Marines that I served with. So I mean, at the end of the day, you get one turn on this blue marble for the best I can see. You might as well just make the best of it no matter where you're at and have some fun along the way. Do good and have fun.
Yeah. Well, BJ, your perspective is golden, and I thank you so much for sharing it with me today. This has just been a ton of fun, and I love what you're doing. I want to help people connect with you guys, so that's part of the reason I do this podcast is just to
Yeah.
get as many ears and eyes on the good things in the world, the things that are making the world better, and you are certainly doing that.
Well, I
So
appreciate that. And, any of your listeners, just go to sierradelta.com. We're a real small team, but we're doing some big work, and join up, figure it out. Give us some ideas, or bring some projects to us, and just get involved. I mean, this is easy stuff, right? It's humans and dogs and service to others. So let's have some fun,
beautiful.
do some good, right?
The simplicity of it is just, I mean, it resonates with everyone. So thank you so much.
Appreciate
And
you so much.
yeah, so tell all my listeners today, thank you so much for joining me and listening into BJ's message. And he's just an awesome example of what I like to remember to remind everybody to just be real, be you, and be better. Thank you so much for listening to What I Meant to Say. If you enjoyed this conversation, you know what to do. Subscribe, rate, review. And for more great content, courses, and lifestyle, go to bebettermedia.tv. Some of these stories contain sensitive content about real-life events, and all of the information in this podcast and from anywhere on the Be Better Media website is for informational purposes only. If you find that you need help, which we all do from time to time, please reach out to a licensed professional for help.